Welcome to the next level, Sega fans. Yes, that's right. It's the Sega guys, whom the 90s still only feels like yesterday. I'm Dan the Mega Driver, and with me, he's the VMU to my Dreamcast pad. It's James the Sega. How you doing, mate? Someone put some batteries in him. Someone get some CL302s.
I get a couple in there and I'll last another few hours. Might see me at the end of the podcast, mate. That's what it is. I'm good, mate. How's yourself?
Yeah, great, mate. Just been playing a bit of Gale Racer for an upcoming video. What's the video going to be? Stay tuned. But yeah, the content train is a rolling with us at the moment, mate.
Our pending videos on YouTube from uploads, I think me and you were simultaneously uploading from our own devices. It's like we had Sega Touring Car going up, with the Crazy Taxi playthrough going up, we've got the Fighting Vipers 2 podcast was going up, there's obviously other content going up that we've not spoke about or unveiled yet, and it's like unbelievable. It's like you have to actually scroll for a bit to find the most recent bit of content that's available. So it's going good, mate. It's we're flying, we're just churning it out now.
Yeah, and what I was thinking was compare that to 12, 16 months ago when we had to go on hiatus because we weren't able to create enough content to keep going. And that was just audio content. Somehow we've got this going. So hope our viewers and our listeners are enjoying it, and long may it continue.
Absolutely, mate.
So today's topic, it's one when we were talking about it, I think we've had this on the back burner for a little while, and I think the reasons to actually make this episode have grown and grown. And it's a tricky one because we don't want to sound like grumpy Sega bastards, and I know we are grumpy Sega bastards, but what we're talking about here, listeners and viewers, is Sega's legacy being forgotten. So there's a couple of things that ticked this off recently, wasn't there, mate?
I think it's more I think the last thing that we seen was it VGC put
That's right, yeah,
a tweet out, and they simply referred to Sega as the Sonic publisher, and I thought that's a bit kind of disparaging, really, isn't it? It's not kind of doing any kind of great service to them. They're certainly more than that. And then we had the GQ greatest 100 games ever. Not a single Sonic game on there.
I think there was one Sega game, which was Yakuza 0.
Yep. And whenever you think of all the franchises that Sega have given us, the memories, just the sheer volume of games that are out there, that were genre defining, that were industry defining, that led platforms into a new generation, and no mention of them at all. So it's something we've always spoken about, is that obviously that potential for history kind of being lost. Is the people who were there and lived through this time that we love so much, that there's a reason why we sit and record every Wednesday, because it's a time that's near and dear to us. There's memories galore, but that kind of worry that as we get older, we're not getting any younger. People like ourselves, other content creators similar ages, like Sega Lord X, for example, as we get older and we're unable to do this, that will Sega's legacy be given the due and credit that it deserves by people who follow us? So I think it's not to try and kind of jump up, and we don't want to it's not that kind of whole gatekeeper thing where people go, and I think there's some people have a problem with people saying I was there, and it's not being said in an attempt to gatekeep, but I think it is very important that the people who were there, who lived these things, who've seen the advancements, who looked forward to new games, read Sega Saturn magazine, read Sega Power, read CVG, read Edge, were tuned in to all these innovations and were excited for it, and I've got everything up there that they remember, that these people are respected, that their views are out there, and that they contribute to an overall greater kind of picture and understanding to make sure that the legacy of not just Sega, I mean, obviously Nintendo are still going, but all these kind of gaming companies, as the decades pass, we need to make sure that isn't eroded. And without be sounding crude, Sega's legacy can't die with us.
Yeah.
And it's not meant to be. I know we're a fun point. It's not to get morbid, but this all factually historical kind of stuff. We want to keep it alive.
No, that's it. And you look at the big Sega content creators. I mean, the Sega Bits, Sega Lord X, Sega Shiro guys, Sat and
Yep.
Dave and the guys were all similar ages. And I think what we're seeing is that the next generation, and we're not gatekeeping, we want everyone to be involved and love and celebrate not just the current games, but the history of games, and understand and appreciate them.
Yep.
And I think what we're trying to do is just trying to understand, and I think the way we've pieced this episode up is probably going to make sense. But I think, what kicked it off for me was that GQ list. Now, we have broached this topic before, and that has been, I think, driven by other top 100s. You see top 100 games all over the place, and you always see people come in and go, this top 100 shite, which, it's the normal reaction. Everyone's going to disagree, and it's fine to disagree. But I think the GQ one was kind of the tipping point for me personally, because it was it 300 experts. And I shouldn't be so cruel as to put the quotation marks with my fingers there, but these are big names. I think Wario64 on there is a guy that is quite prominent on Twitter and knows his stuff. And it's just, why was there only one Sega game on there? Why was there no Mega Drive games on there? Why was there no Atari games on there? Why is there no, what was this huge, like, everything was focused on games that came out mostly since 2010.
Yeah.
So I think there is a bit of, recency bias in there. Mm-hmm. And it is because of that generation, because of that younger generation. So I think it's a good thing to talk about, this is why we're talking about this topic. This is why this topic has come up. Is Sega losing its legacy? And bring it back to why it is that we love Sega, why we think that Sega is so important, and just try and understand why it is happening and why we feel that it's being forgotten or ignored. And I think there's many facets to it, especially, as to why it's happening.
I mean, let's not forget, we're not going to sit here and paint Sega as some kind of victim in all of this. I mean, let's not forget, Sega are pretty much doing this to themselves, if we're being horrifically honest. It's like, it's no secret that people are crying out for Sega to remaster old classics, and not just arcade games. We've spoken before about the games on the arcade that have got like licensing issues, your Daytonas, your Sega Rallies, that have got branding, stuff like that. Even casting all of that aside, there is so much they could do. Like the fact that was it Bomb Rush Psycho Funk, whatever the hell they call it?
Bomb Rush Cyberpunk,
yeah, that one. I mean, the fact that someone else had to go and make a Jet Set Radio game because Sega won't make a new Jet Set Radio. It's crazy. There's so much that they could do, even casting aside all the arcade stuff that's got licenses. So, Sega definitely need to take their share of the blame in that. But it's almost like they're kind of helping the industry not just leave them behind, but not rebrand them, but kind of change what they mean, change what they stand for. The Sega that we grew up with no longer exists. That's just a sad fact of the matter. They're a completely different company now. But you would still think that they are tuned in to the fan base. They've got the Sega Forever account. Guys like Danny, and Marilia, who are the social media, the community managers, they're always tuned in on Twitter. I mean, Danny and Marilia have given us codes for giveaways and stuff like that, so they know the community's out there. And they know that they're older gamers like us, like Sega Lord X, like the Shiro guys, etc. So why Sega aren't listening to what people want, and the Yakuza games are great, let's not lie. I mean, bringing those games onto like Xbox and Game Pass and remastering the older ones and things like that is absolutely brilliant, but there's more than Yakuza. People crying out for obviously Shenmue 4, which is not specifically Sega direct because it's Yu Suzuki doing all the kind of stuff on his own, like Shenmue 3. But there's more than that. We've got so much we could go back on, and it's just annoying that they're kind of doing it to themselves. They're digging their own grave, so to speak.
I know, mate. I know, and I think that's probably why we know to bring it back in now to why are Sega worthy of what we feel is reverence, really.
Yeah.
Reverence, respect, however you want to term it. But I think it's remind ourselves, and maybe remind or show our listeners why it is that we love Sega. I mean, what does Sega mean to you, mate?
Sega to me is gaming, pure and simple. It's the arcades, it's the blue skies, it's Yunin Hyundai, it's 3, 2, 1 go, it's easy right, maybe. It's crazy money, it's mechs fighting each other. It's just, it's Eurobeat and touring cars, the blue blur. It's just there's just so much, the orange swirl. There's just if I could there's so many things you could just encompass into one that Sega were the kind of forbidden fruit for me, but we've not going to go into the kind of whole historical kind of origin stories of gaming, but obviously that I wanted the Mega Drive, didn't get one. So, when I got the Saturn off the back of those arcade memories, it was just Sega were just something, they were above everything else. Like everything I had at home and that I seen my friends having, you go into the arcades, boom, Sega was up there. They were bright, bold, colourful, innovative, loud, in your face, the cabinet designs. I mean, who else would build a game about Ferrari and put the cabinet for the deluxe in a miniaturized Ferrari cockpit
Yep.
with 3 screens that when you're in that, you feel even like the gear stick, the dash, the wheel. Mate, I'm convinced they modelled the wheel on an actual Ferrari wheel because
Oh yeah,
it felt so luxurious. It
I
was like,
guarantee that they did.
and it's Sega to me just represents, a time of sheer wonderment in gaming. The friendships that I had at that time, as I've mentioned before, you know, Sam and I used to take walks into to Partick and we'd go to all the game shops, and the sole purpose of us going to all those game shops was to see what new Sega stuff they had.
Yeah,
That was it. So there's just, there's my youth tied in there. There's, the kind of exciting technological advancements, the new games, great friendships, as I said. So, it's just that I could sit here and find 100 things of what Sega means to me, but it's just all of those things together are the kind of passion that drives what we do.
yeah. No, brilliantly said, mate. I think you've hit the nail on the head around it's because I feel exactly the same that Sega is gaming. And gaming is in a very different place now
Yeah,
to what it was back when we were young. But
a long time
a
ago.
long time ago, and yeah, it's a long time where a lot of things have changed. But to me, Sega had an immediacy that even to a degree Nintendo didn't have at the time. See, Sega for me were adventurous. They weren't afraid to take risks and push boundaries in pretty much every sense of what they did. I don't think they ever had anyone tell them this is not a good idea, because they just seem to go out and do it. Like you say, mate, who makes a free screen miniature Ferrari that it costs £2 to go to play? Now going back to that, you look at the gyroscopic afterburner cabinet.
Yes.
That would never pass health and safety regulations these days. But
Sat a kid inside that.
but that Sega to me is video gaming at high speed. It's life in the fast lane. It's driving around in your Ferrari with a blue sky overhead, listening to magical sound shower while an F-22 combat Tomcat soars overhead. It was bold, bright, brash, cocky. Even there's almost a swagger to it, which is amusing because when I first got with Sega, it was just when Sonic had only just arrived on the scene, and they already had they're already kind of cocksure of themselves. It felt, we've had the whole Cyber Razor Cup part in in our early seasons of the Sega guys. The Cyber Razor Cup, yes, was just cool. Sega were cool. They were cool, and you just wanted to be around them. Contrast that to Nintendo at the time, who were very child orientated, and still, and they changed a little bit towards the end of the 16-bit console war, but Sega were the ones that were cool at the time. But another thing that I've been thinking, I don't know if you've spotted the new addition to the wall, but
Oh, aye.
I've been playing. I just started playing Tears of the Kingdom, and there was a discussion. I think we were WhatsApping about it. The Dreamcast Junkyard have done games that embody the spirit of the Dreamcast, and Tears of the Kingdom for me not only embodies the spirit of the Dreamcast, but embodies the spirit of classic Sega, because yes, there's an opening cutscene. It lasts about 3 to 5 minutes, and then it's just you just play. Sega to me is play, just pure, unadulterated fun. Bringing a smile to your face, just simple things. Tears of the Kingdom for me, it was when I first built this little contraption that went down this slide. I was like, oh, that's brilliant. But the amount of times that Sega have done that, I'd be on the count. Even the first loop to loop that you go through with Sonic, first time you passed a checkpoint in Outrun, the first time you did a power loop in Nights into Dreams to put out a fire in Burning Ranges, or soared through the sky in Panzer Dragoon. There's so many moments that Sega have just given you that pure thrill, that adrenaline, and not through showing you, but by telling you, by letting you, not through a cutscene. It's not like, oh, this cutscene was epic. It's so cinematic. It's just been, you've been in control the whole time, and just with, a D-pad and 2, 3, 6 buttons, you've been able to engage in a whole world in a way that you've never known before.
Aye, and I think, again, without sounding like kind of shouting at the cloud, angry old kind of men, but I personally don't see the appeal in a game where you sit with the controller in your hand, itching to play, but you're forced to watch a 15-minute cutscene, or something, even a 10-15-minute cutscene. And that's what, again, never, I don't want the fanboys coming after me, right? But The Last of Us, right? There's no wonder that was a fantastic TV show.
Yep.
But as a video game, as an experience to bring what you said there, bring a smile to your, no, it's not going to bring a smile to your face in a post-apocalyptic world with a fungal-based virus, but it feels as if almost gaming's trying to, and I know it has to kind of grow up, right, which the technology allows it to do, but if we forgot how to have fun, it just seems as well when you look at the gaming news, it's people used to argue, about like Sega versus Sony versus Nintendo, and then it was like 360 versus PS3, and then it was 720p on Xbox One, 1080p on PS4, and then it was real 4K and checkerboard 4K and the Pro, and then all of a sudden we're now talking about acquisitions. It's like slowly it's all just drifting away from. I'm sorry, I just you kind of miss whenever gaming was about gaming, and I think, and maybe I don't know if that's why Sega are just kind of stuck in their own wee kind of silo. They're quite happy with what they're doing. That perhaps when they've bought Rovio, the Angry Birds thing, you see the money that makes. Again, people said they should have spent that money on a new console. It would cost more than $700 million to make a new console, trust me. In the modern day, there's just no way Sega could afford, even as part of the Sammy group, to come back, sadly. But aye, I've been seeing a lot of stuff about Tears of the Kingdom. It's funny you mention the kind of Nintendo side, because not to, also people are going to go, oh, Sega fanboy, going to say this, but going all the way back, hand on heart, Nintendo games that I've bought, Nintendo systems. I bought the first DS. I imported the Game Boy Advance, the purple one with F-Zero. Had a GameCube, had a Wii briefly, but it's just Nintendo games have never had. Like, I could play Mario. I had the Switch Lite as well. Punted that. Just there's no longevity. Nintendo games, hand on heart, have never had a hook with me at all. It's like I can't get them. Like there's just like I can pick up Sonic and I can hear Green Hills on it. It's like, but like the Mario thing, whenever you hear Mario's theme and woohoo, that just there's nothing there. Like Zelda's never resonated with me. Mario Kart the exact same. Metroid Prime was decent. I did enjoy that in the GameCube. That was nice. Star Fox Adventures was shite. right? I hated that. It was so bad. Why'd I spend money on that? But it's like there's just never been a hook. Like the games have never interested me. That's not me saying they're bad games. They've just never interested me. They've never appealed to me. But I mean, it's no surprise to see Tears of the Kingdom get the reception that it has done. I mean, Breath of the Wild was a phenomenal piece of software.
It
So,
was.
so I mean, hopefully you're enjoying that, mate. I'm glad to hear that you're getting some of that old feeling back.
Yeah. No, I have, and I spoke before about Elden Ring, and I think the thing that Tears of the Kingdom, Elden Ring, and Sonic Frontiers, and people go, why are you lumping Sonic Frontiers in with them two? But the reason why all three, I think, because they all have modern open worlds, but they're large and they basically just let you get on with it. Sonic's got very little cutscenes, and that's why I love that. The whole world in Sonic was basically a playground and a puzzle, and it's that same. Tears of the Kingdom and Elden Ring are cut from that same cloth. You don't sit there watching really long cutscenes. You just get in there and you just have fun and you experiment and you just play. I do have a soft spot for Nintendo, certain Nintendo systems. I mean, the SNES have a real soft spot for the Wii U, another have a big soft spots for as well, or the DS and the GBA. And I think it's because Nintendo are forever entwined with Sega, because the rivalry is long documented, and from 1980 or 1983 or 1985 when the first consoles came out, the SG-1000 and the Famicom, all the way until the Saturn outsold the N64 was kind of where that rivalry ended, because by the time the Dreamcast came out, it was gone before the GameCube landed. So, but like Sega, Nintendo are pure gaming. They're pure gaming, and the approach is different. And this is why I much prefer Sega. Sega, if you play Mario Kart, it's fun, and it's fun to play with friends and family and stuff. But you're not going to sit there playing the same course. Oh, you mean people do, but not to the extent that you could with Sega Rally. There's not that hook. It hasn't got those. I mean, the reason why their games get a lot of plaudits because it's because they're longer. It's because they're, Sega Rally's got 4 courses, Mario Kart's got 16. Sonic the Hedgehog and Super Mario World. Sonic the Hedgehog got 6 times 3, it's got 18 acts, 6 zones. Super Mario World's got 96 stages. It's Nintendo were more about the content and giving you scope to play. But for me personally, their games didn't play and weren't as exciting as Sega's. They weren't as immediate. They weren't as plentiful. I think we've talked before about how, and I wrote in a blog post, a very old blog post on the Sega Guys blog, about how I felt that Sega were the greatest first-party publisher of all time. Because it wasn't just that their games were fun and engaging and very memorable at the time, but the just sheer wealth of content, because they were in a position where they had to make their own games. They had to go out because Nintendo had tied everyone up. Nintendo could, on the SNES, I think they had less than 20 first-party games come out on it, whereas Sega had about 70 or 80 on the Mega Drive, and that's because Nintendo could sit back and say, we got Square Enix, we got Capcom. Capcom will make Final Fight. Square Enix will make Final Fantasy. Not Square Enix, to be Squaresoft at the time. Sega are like, well, we'll have to make Streets of Rage, and we'll have to make Fantasy Star, and we'll have to make Shining Force. And you look at the sheer variety of games there. We're talking about a beat 'em up, a platformer, a tactical RPG, a turn-based RPG. Sega did it all. Nintendo is Metroid, Zelda, Kirby, Mario, and Donkey Kong, and they're all kind of in their genres, whereas Sega did everything, and not just in servicing multiple genres. Games like Crazy Taxi, they invented one. So it's like the stuff that they did. Shenmue again, they basically revolutionized the third-person adventure game. So what they do, just it's mind-blowing when I think about it.
And even at that as well, whenever they obviously couldn't get third parties to make games for them, they licensed the games and made them themselves. You know,
Yeah.
like certain cap was it Strider?
Strider.
You know, massive game, and they had basically they done their own port of it. They were going to do their own port of Street Fighter 2 until Capcom seen it and went, no, right, hold on. It's no bad effort, right? We've licensed you, but we'll right, you've shown us, right, you can handle it, but we'll do a full one ourselves. So
yeah,
you know,
Strider, Ghouls and Ghosts, Double Dragon, Ninja Gaiden. There's like the list goes on and on and on. That there's like Nintendo were like, oh no, technology, you can't make games for Sega. For Sega were like, well, give us the license, we'll pay you for the license, we'll do it ourselves.
You know what I mean? To have the balls to even do that though. You know. Brilliant.
Yeah, I know. And those ports are better than most of the other ports that are around at the time.
Raider's great in the Mega Drive.
Yeah, Final Fight as well. Final Fight is another one. SNES,
exactly.
SNES exclusive. SNES exclusive with one character and 2 enemy sprites. And Sega are like, well, Capcom, can you make it for our Mega CD? No, we can't. Exclusive to Nintendo. Well, fine. We'll write the license. We'll make it ourselves, and it'll have 2 players, all the characters, 6 sprites on screen.
And we'll just remix the soundtrack for the hell of it.
Yeah, but I mean that's it. Just again, I was talking about the audacity of them, the sheer brazenness for them to just go out there and do it. It's just that's what they are to me. Just it's super bold and super exciting.
Brilliant, mate. Brilliant.
Now you touched on something now that I think I've got a few notes on, just around watching games. It's an interesting trend because you say The Last of Us. No wonder it turned into a good TV show, because it's basically a TV show of a bit of holding up, press triangle, move this crate around, maybe do a little bit of sneaking and stabbing. But
don't forget the wooden pallets.
Yeah, but it's the same for I've been playing Plague Tale, and that's very similar. A bit more inventive with the gameplay, but again, spend a lot of time sitting there just like, oh, well, this is going. I'll go make a cup of tea, and it's like a lot of games go out like that. When I did a quote tweet on the GQ article and said, well, where's your Virtua Fighter? Where's your Sonic the Hedgehog? Where's your Mega Drive games? Where's your Atari? Someone quote tweeted me and said, well, there's a reason none of those games have any story, so they all suck. You just think, is story all that people care about? And I've got a theory. I feel I'm obviously a borderline Gen X millennial. I think I'll probably lean more to the Gen X in the way that I prefer arcade games in terms of my.
Where did I get classed as, mate?
I think you're Gen X.
I'm a.
But
79, mate. So
yeah, I think it's just generalizing here, but I find most people just my age and maybe a little bit younger, the people that have done this GQ piece. These 300 experts, they're all going to be between 20 to 35, say. Mm-hmm. And that's why they heavily favor all these narrative driven cinematic games. But what I'm finding with the next generation, obviously I've got young kids, I've got my son and a lot of his friends could not care less about cutscenes. You ask them what their favorite games are: Fortnite, Minecraft, Apex Legends. And there's a reason why those games are so big. FIFA. The reason why those games are so big is because they are pure gameplay. They're not the arcade sort of games that we grew up with, but they are games where you don't have to sit there, you don't have to get told why you're doing something. You just go in and you play. And that's what video games are to me, is that you should be able to just go in and play. I'm not saying that I don't enjoy the odd cinematic experience, but that's what games should be to me. If you can have a great game without cinematics, but you can't have a great game without good gameplay.
A great game should allow you with a degree to go in without reading the manual, without checking the controls, and have a play about, still have a bit of fun.
Yeah.
Let's be honest, whenever you brought a new game home, cartridge or disc, you never read the manual.
No.
You didn't read the controls. You just slapped the disc in, loaded it up and hit start and just jumped in. And I think a lot of that's kind of lost now. Like, there's a lot of hand holding. Like, the one game that comes to mind, Sonic Adventure. Do you remember the first time you went to the Mystic Ruins?
Yeah.
The game didn't tell you that you had to
No.
pick that wee egg up and put it over there to activate the
Yeah, the Windy Valley.
the big windy, and you jumped in and up you went.
Yeah.
Didn't tell you that. You know, I think you get a mild hint. I think there's another wee green and grey egg that comes off a shelf in a wee kind of pool area that the wee
Yeah.
explorer guys are looking about, and it gives you a wee hint about there being some kind of area to put it. But the game literally doesn't point you in the right. It literally just lets you get off that train, run down those stairs,
Yeah.
and figure it out.
Yeah. Figure it out.
You know, so aye, whereas now you look at like the footage that like it's mocked of like certain games that are, you know, attack when it's facing the rear. It's most vulnerable. It's like what? It's like
Yeah, that's something that really bugs me about God of War is, you know, I'm sitting there, you know, trying to figure out a puzzle or trying to fight a boss, and whoever's with me at the time, whether it's his son, whose name escapes me at the moment, or the witch, whatever her name is. I can't remember their names. I only played it a little while ago.
is that Freya?
Freya, that's the one. And it's like, you know, why don't you try moving this over there? I think that's fine. And it's like God of War's bad enough for the fact that, you know, can I climb that ledge? Well, there's a great big bit of painting on it, you know, with that marking that shows that I can paint it, that I can climb it. And meanwhile, why don't you try climbing that ledge? Well, you know, you're fighting a boss. It's weak when it does this. Let me figure it out.
See, I'd like the bit of difficulty. You would have like easy, medium, hard, and then like maybe expert, and then one more called fuck off. Where basically, like, and there's a whole new set of lines recorded whenever they give you hints. Kratos goes, "Fuck off, boy."
You shut your mouth, boy.
I can figure this out myself, boy. It's like, you know, it's just. And is it because the visuals are maybe that detailed that perhaps like everything that, like you always remember like older games, 8 and 16-bit games, like there would be like wee kind of differences that you would be able to see, like a rock you can smash, or you know, in Mario you can tell the difference between ones you can hit for coins and what ones you can destroy. But if you're looking at a mountain with a ledge, you don't know what bit you're meant to grab to progress. So maybe is it just the fact that things are too detailed that they have to give you these visual cues? But I mean, would you be there all day trying to climb different bits of mountains and not know where to go? I'm just trying to kind of surmise as to why they've went so heavy on hand holding. Like, are modern gamers that mollycoddled that they can't figure the bloody thing out?
No, I'd say that modern gamers can figure it out, and I'd say case in point is Zelda, is Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. I mean, the bit that I was, you know, created this contraption for, there's absolutely no guidance. It just said, you've got a magic power, you can fuse things together and create contraptions, and that was it. So I was just wandering around, and I was just looking at these bits all over the floor. I was like, well, if I stick that on there, and I stick that on there, and I put that there, no, that doesn't work. I'll do this, I'll try this. And then it started moving. I was like, oh, it works. It works. Jumped on it. And that was the solution. It didn't help my hand. And your point about things being far too detailed. Yes, I could see that might be an issue, but the thing is, again, Breath of the Wild, Tears of the Kingdom, you can literally scale anything, you know. So, and people enjoy those games. Obviously, Tears of the Kingdom's done supremely well commercially. So people don't necessarily want to be mollycoddled. I think it's certain games where they want you to get to the end because they've spent so much money on your actors and your cinematics.
I will.
that you know, oh, you've got to finish this.
You are going to see my full performance in this game.
We've paid this actor a lot of money to say these lines. You are going to see them.
You are going to see the full script. You know, even the credits for the first God of War, Atreus and Kratos are still talking. There's credits rolled on the screen. They're still talking. Also, the big end reveal about Atreus is part of that. But you know, it's like they're still talking. credits are rolling. It's worse than a Marvel movie.
I know. But yeah, I don't know if it is a generational thing. I don't know if, we are obviously the ones that grew up with arcades. I mean, there was story-driven games back when, back in the day for us, but even RPGs were a lot more, they just stuck you out there a lot more like Dark Souls, and even your point and clicks, which had, they didn't have your sort of your typical gameplay, but they were
Oh,
problem
mate.
solving.
Monkey
Monkey
Island
Island.
2. Jesus Christ. How many times how long could you spend in one screen trying to figure out what let you off it? Look, all the commands in the bottom. Look, click that, click there. It's an empty bottle. There's not much I can do with this. It's like, fuck. It's like, it took ages to get off a screen. Sometimes you had to really look about and try and figure out what was the game wanting you to do.
Yeah.
Oh man.
So I don't think it's a new thing, but it just feels like people are being, the industry's gone to the point where it's just making it too easy and too much on autopilot. It feels like, whereas Sega are, and a lot of these companies are Sega, Atari, all old school. They come from put your 20p in the machine, you get you get one go, and if you screw this up, well, you have to put another 20p in.
I mean, I don't know. I just think obviously there's a big fad for retro gaming just now, and it's not all young gamers look at the older games and go, "These are shite." There's a lot of people who do gravitate towards them and want to kind of learn about them and pick them up, and that's great. It's encouraging to see, but it is, I think the generational thing's a really good point, because like, as much as I'd let my nephew play Sega Rally, and that was maybe when I first got the Saturn back from uncles, so about 3 years ago. But even like his gaming tastes have shifted. Like, I try and show him stuff now, and it's just these old games, but like, to me, Crazy Taxi, to you, it's still magical. You hear the Offspring, the minute you hear yeah, that's you get away. You're picking passengers up, you're laughing at their patterns. Are you going to get a fat tip for that? It's like, whoa, all these kind of wee crazy sound bites and stuff like that. And you chuckle away and you sing along to the songs by the Offspring and Bad Religion. And it's like, but there's some younger gamers who just go, "You drive a taxi?" But you don't get it. It's not just a taxi. It's like, you get to drive anywhere and go over ramps and go stupid tricks and drifts, but I still think that it's that whole story driven thing. It's, we kind of seen the shift towards it kind of a wee bit with PS1 with stuff like, your Resident Evils and your Metal Gear Solids and stuff like that. And it's just as if the kind of, as each generation has passed, it's just snowballed, and because of the technological advances and stuff like that, it's just basically went, it's went absolutely crazy. It's just, gaming eclipses what cinema makes. It's also eclipsing some of the stories that cinema can tell.
Yeah, it absolutely is.
So
some of the stuff out there is sensational. It really must be said. Would I prefer to play it, or would I prefer to cuddle up with the missus and watch it as a 10-part Netflix miniseries? I don't know. I'd like to actually play my games, but I do like games like The Last of Us. I did like the first God of War. Ragnarok disappointed me a little bit. I did like the first Plague Tale. The second one I'm not too keen on, but I do like those sort of games. I'll try anything. But yeah, it's a couple of things there, mate. I mean, the first thing is obviously there is a bit of nostalgia bias in what we see. Now I do like, my kids barely ever come in here. They do get excited. Like, my daughter was in here the other day going, "What's that?" I was like, "This is a Game Boy." "Oh wow, is that the first Pokemon?" It's like, "Yes, the very first Pokemon." She played it for 5 minutes. Like, "Yeah, I'm going to go back to the Switch version." But as I said, my son likes gameplay experiences, and he, as I was saying, he likes Apex, Halo, Dragon Ball Fighters. We were playing a fighting game just now. We're playing Guilty Gear Strive actually, and I told the story before about when he came home. or when I came home from work and he was enjoying himself on Daytona on the Series X. You know, again, another classic game, which, to be fair, today it still looks $1 million and just plays like an absolute dream. So I don't know. I think some of those games still have that hook. But when I think about the nostalgia bias, you know, part of me thinks, is it just that we are of a certain age and we have that affinity? But I think when we're talking about the legacy of Sega, there's no shortage of things that they actually brought to the table. You know, that the industry wouldn't be where it was if it wasn't for Sega. And you mentioned just now, the PS1 era was was where story-driven, you know, games actually rose to prominence. Obviously, we had JRPG or RPGs on the SNES, Mega Drive, and PC before that. But when I think of where cinematic games first started, it's the Mega CD.
I will. I mean, just to kind of very, very quickly, you know, we're talking about that. We spoke about the kind of GQ list before we come back to that. But I think what annoyed me about the kind of GQ list is that I don't think the people they spoke to considered, you know, the impact that the games had on the industry.
Yeah.
Like, I think if you're going to pick the 100 greatest games of all time, there has to be pioneers in there. You know, so obviously Shenmue made it in. You know, you can argue it was the first kind of real console open world game. Can go anywhere, speak to anyone, pick things up, you know, cinematic experience. But Virtua Fighter 1 should be in there.
Yeah.
You know, it literally is responsible for the creation of the PlayStation 1 as we know it. It made Sony change tact. Seeing VF1 in the arcades is what led to the PlayStation being the console it is. It's a sliding doors moment.
Yeah.
That's not nostalgia bias or Sega bias or Virtua Fighter bias. It's a historically important title that changed the industry.
Yeah.
You know, Virtua Racing should be in there for me. Again, Model 1 polygonal racing alongside Virtua Fighter showed the direction that gaming was going to go. So I think just to, again, not to shit on The Last of Us, it is not one of the top 3 greatest games of all time because it simply isn't a game. It hasn't driven anything in the industry. It hasn't changed anything or pioneered anything or been an innovator in anything. And I think if you're picking the 100 most important games of all time, then to only have one Sega game in there, I mean,
it must have been 2 because I forgot that Shenmue was in there. So Shenmue.
And Yakuza 0. So it just goes back to that whole generational point, but it is disappointing because that's what it goes back to. Did these people who were picking these games, did they even consider looking back and thinking about gaming's history and the sliding doors moments and the franchises and the titles and the technology that literally took us to where we are today? I think that is far more important than being able to go, oh, look at that those great cutscenes are so cinematic, the visuals are so great, the storytelling is so fantastic. And The Last of Us is, as we said, it's why it made a great TV show, but you've got to think about the impact. If you're talking about the gaming industry, influential, most important, best games, you've got to look back and look at these titles that drove us to where we are.
Yeah, I completely agree, mate. And I think that's kind of where you kind of have to give them a bit of slack for the people that chose it, because they've said, well, what's the best games? But, you know, it's turned to what's your favorite games. And the favorite games of those people, because of their age and demographic, is going to be recent games. It's going to be story-driven games. Even the 2 Sega games that are in there, Yakuza 0 and Shenmue, are both story-driven. Probably the most cutscene-heavy Sega games that there are out there. So it speaks volumes about what was chosen. But, you know, in a way, it does show, you know, what a fallacy it is almost to have a top 10, top 100 or top 10, top 1,000, top 10,000 greatest games of all time, because it's so incredibly subjective. And as I said, whenever anyone at the beginning of the podcast, whenever anyone puts out a list like that, first thing is that you get a load of people saying this list is shite. Minecraft shouldn't be on there. Minecraft is shite. you know, I think there's a lot of snobbery around Minecraft, actually. I mean, I'm probably going on a bit of a tangent there, but Minecraft isn't one that, me and you are going to go out of our way to play. And I think a lot of people in the demographic that chose that, we say, yeah, I don't play Minecraft. But as someone that's played a lot of Minecraft with all three of his kids, and Minecraft has been in our house since 2012 when it got released on the Xbox 360. I've played it with all of them, and they've all, my youngest Aria still wants to play it with me. We were playing the preview version just the other day, and yeah, it's not fashionable. It's very kiddie, but it is, just like other games mentioned, it just encourages play. You just get dropped in a world, encourages play, experimentation, exploration. Yeah, there's a little bit of jank in there, but it's just about using your imagination. And I think that's very Sega-like.
Aye.
So yeah, back to the original point. People are always going to argue about what game's best. These are the best games, but the most important games of all time, the most innovative, I think that is something that can be quantified. And I think that's where Sega really, really deserves the respect.
Aye. We were also going through, if you're not just talking about franchises that kind of led, but technology-wise as well. There's so many. Now, in some cases, they were first in a lot of these, sometimes by years, sometimes by months, even weeks. Some of them were failures, but were picked up later on and have become, a standard for modern consoles. So, aye, it's that whole thing about people forgetting that they've not just driven software, but they've also driven where the hardware has gone to. Like, the one that people go to straight away is Dreamcast, the first online console out the box. But obviously, Saturn had a modem, the NetLink. Mega Drive had a form of online as well. They tried to do it as well. So, there was attempts, but the Dreamcast was the first one out the box. You could plug it in and play online. But there's just so many other things. Like, we researching for this episode, there's just so many things.
It's absolutely. I mean, the Dreamcast itself has so many. Dual screen gaming. The VMU screen was tiny. I mean, the VMU was so innovative. It's a shame it didn't catch on. Yeah, obviously the battery life was awful, and the screen, etc., was tiny. But having playing Resident Evil Code Veronica and having your life bar go pip pip. Yes, stuff like the Wii U was a failure, but you look at the Nintendo DS, which was a massive success. Dual screen gaming has its place in the pantheon of gaming history, and the Dreamcast was one of the first, or was the first, to do it out of the box. You needed a VMU to save your game, so straight away you had a second screen, albeit 2 colors, low resolution, dot matrix, etc. But did it out of the box. The controller, again, I mean, and this goes back to the Sega Saturn controller. So the analog controllers were almost pioneered by Sega themselves. Now, the Sega Saturn 3D controller came out 2 weeks after the N64 launch.
It was out a year before the first PlayStation dual analog. You know what I mean? So,
and the thing about the Dreamcast and the Saturn controllers is that those, you never ever will get any sort of stick drift because they work in a completely unique way. But they also brought, what's standard on every single console now is analog triggers. First came in on the Sega Saturn. So there's so much, there's the Sega channel on the Mega Drive or the Genesis, because it wasn't really mass adopted. There was mass adoption over here, but again, that was Game Pass 25 years before Game Pass was even a figment of Phil Spencer's imagination. Motion control, they had the Sega Activator, which is basically like an even worse version of Kinect. But
there's a big kind of hexagon style track you would build around you to stand inside. But again, it never succeeded. But they were thinking about using the body to control a game, which obviously, as we said, Kinect that's exactly what that was, your body as a controller. But,
Yeah.
Again, Sega tried it, as you said, all those decades before they tried it.
Yeah. The Sega bass fishing rod, like I had the official Japanese, I've still got the official Japanese one, was a motion controller. If you have never, ever got your Sega bass fishing controller, I always try to get bass because that's the Japanese name, but you get your fishing controller, hook it up to your Dreamcast, put on Soul Calibur, and wave it around like a madman. It is absolutely sensational. Yeah. And this is again predating the Wii U. And it's not just, we're talking a lot about hardware here. We're talking about dual screens, online capabilities, controllers, game hardware. Sega were the pioneers in many ways of 3D. Superscalers, Space Harrier, Outrun, Afterburner broke the mold on how games could work in a 3D space back in the 80s. Those games were absolutely sensational. You look at other games that came out in 1985, 1986 it was, Space Harrier. You look at what else was around even in the arcades, which were, the pinnacle of gaming technology.
Yeah.
Nothing really came close to Space Harrier, did it?
No, and I mean, even as you mentioned there, I mean, not just the scalar games, but you mentioned about pioneering 3D.
Yeah.
But I mean, who else would work with a company like Lockheed Martin to create a board to create video games? Like, no wonder, like, we keep talking about Daytona USA, its worldwide rollout was 94, but test arcades got it in 93.
Yeah.
1993. You were still playing, as I said before, Lotus Turbo Challenge 2 was like 92.
Yeah.
I think. So you're going from, like, how did Sega ever think to get military grade hardware to make? It's like the OCP of gaming. It's like we got access to military weaponry. We practically are the military.
Yeah, you can imagine them going into Lockheed Martin. Now, this is the most sophisticated combat simulation you've ever seen, and you want to make video games with it?
You Suzuki's like that.
Yep.
It's crazy. It's that they had the foresight to actually think to use that technology to make games to drive the industry forward.
Yeah. And that's the frustration with Sega, is that they had the open goal and unfortunately they weren't joined up. The arcade and home divisions just weren't joined up. If they were, Yu Suzuki would have said, this is what we got in the arcade. Hideki Sato, this is what you need to put in a console. And obviously they were miles apart, and Sony were kind of in between, going, so that's what you're doing, but we want that, so we'll take that. And it's crazy that Sega basically set the standard for free. Obviously, there was polygonal games before virtual racing, before the Model 1. So Sega weren't the first, but they were the ones that made it feasible and popular. Virtual racing was a revelation when that came out, just because it was so fast, fluid, and unlike anything else anyone had ever seen.
I mean, the funny thing is as well is that Sega with the Dreamcast and the Naomi seemed to kind of catch up with the idea of what Sony had done at the very start with Namco.
Yeah.
Like, you're talking about how Sony seen what Sega were doing and kind of changed tact, but Sega never quite had the alignment. Like, the Saturn was doing really good ports of these arcade games, but they were miles away in terms of visuals, but they still managed to capture the gameplay.
Yeah.
But you had, was it the System 11 board, System 22 board? So Sony,
the System 11 was the Sony board, yeah.
Yeah. So Sony and Namco did it the other way around. They sort of went, right, well, here's PlayStation technology with a bit more kind of grunt to it, but not enough so that the PlayStation ports are grossly inferior.
Yeah.
Maybe Ridge Racer runs half the frame rate as an arcade game, right? That's fine, but visually, it's pretty close.
Yeah.
So I think it was like Namco and Sony did that kind of whole. They didn't go arcade to console. It was like console to arcade and back again. Kind of.
Yeah,
I'm like Doctor Strange sitting here giving it all this, but in the Dreamcast and Naomi was sort of like finally Sega realizing they had to change the tact a bit.
yeah. Ridge Racer is a funny one because that obviously came out in '93 because Daytona was made as a kind of Sega's response to it. Ridge Racer was on the System 22, which is a fair amount more powerful than the PlayStation, which is why the PlayStation port runs at half the frame rate. And then that was a response to Virtual Racing, which Virtual Racing was a response to Starblade. um, and yes, Virtual Racing took it to another level, and Namco took it a little bit further. The System 32 isn't that much more powerful than the Model 1, but can do texture maps. And then the Model 2 came out, which was just generationally leaps and bounds above anything else anyone had ever seen. But Sony did say, yeah, well, make us low cost ports. Namco must have known them that the writing for the arcade industry was on the wall because they were making Tekken and a bunch of games all were on the System 11, which is basically just PlayStation hardware, whereas Sega were like, yeah, we're going to still, so you can't make a arcade board as powerful as the Model 2. Well, we're going to make the Model 3 anyway. And we've got how's that? How are you going to port Virtua Fighter 3 to the Sega Saturn? I don't know. We'll do it.
We'll try. And if we can't, then we'll just bring out something that can do a port of it as they did do. Obviously, Genki took it on, but it was that Sega were that laser focus still on being the best in the arcade.
Yeah.
Which is again that's just what they were. Like nobody could touch Sega in the arcade.
No.
Nobody. Not for game design, not for visuals, not for cabinet design, nothing. Like, and again, maybe people might look at it and go, well, that's why they got in trouble because they were spending lavish amounts of money on hardware, cabinet design, R&D, Lockheed Martin partnerships for boards, that maybe Namco were right to just use what they had that was working and just use that partnership with Sony to help drive their games. But no one can deny it was a bloody good ride. I mean, remember getting to see the first time I seen the Lost World arcade machine. Oh my God, I thought it was a film. I'm like, Jesus. It was like just unbelievable. Like that every time you seen a new Sega game in the arcades, it blew you away. Like it was kind of like just, oh, I'll never get better than that. And then what? It's like insane.
No, it's the same way. It was the same like with Virtua Cop. Playing that, I was like, oh my God, this is incredible. And then I saw Virtua Fighter 3. I was like, oh, the eyes tracking. I was like, this is it. We've hit photorealism. And then the Lost World was another one. I remember putting it was £2 to go.
That's right.
Giant cab. But I was just like, please, can I have £2 to go on the Lost World machine? And I ended up getting shot on by the Brontosaurus or whatever, and losing all lives there. But then the Star Wars trilogy arcade, that literally just looked like the film back then.
Yeah.
So that was astounding. But even in the home, I think the stuff that they did, they don't get credit for. And I think another thing that prompted this discussion was there was a poll. I can't remember who did it now. It was quite a big account that said, who's responsible for bringing gaming to the mainstream? And the options were Sony, Nintendo, Sega, and Microsoft. And Sega were last in the poll. And you just think, well, Sony, you could make a really good argument for, because Sony were the ones who took Sega's ball and run with it, but they still took Sega's ball. Xbox, let's be real, right? Xbox aren't that popular. They definitely aren't popular right now. Nintendo were never, and probably still aren't bothered about the mass market. They still aim for a very young demographic. It's just that appeal is kind of like a Disney Pixar appeal, which is it kind of does appeal to the masses, but it's younger person focused. You're not going to get Mario fighting zombies, hacking them to death, going, "Woohoo, you motherfucker!" No, so
I can just see the Radio Sega Discord just now after that, mate. Really.
like, Nintendo didn't want to take us. It was Sega that actually expanded out to the and we've spoken to still laughing.
I'm just trying. You've now got me thinking of different Sega lines for more serious games and Mario's voice. We're meeting a G over there. Woohoo!
No, the best one would be House of the Dead Overkill.
Oh,
It's a motherfucking Mario, you son of a bitch.
mate, why did they get? Who was it they got? Was it Chris Pratt they got to do the voice of Mario? I should have got you, mate. You're 10 times better.
But yeah, we spoke to Tom and Al, and Al was very proud. Al said it was that lifestyle approach that they took.
Yep.
To try and expand beyond the kids that Nintendo was targeting at the time, and it's a demographic that Atari had for a while, and then lost when everyone lost interest in video games in the US. But Sega just tapped into that demographic, and that's where computer users were being drawn in. Computer users, like I think that's why they were so big in the UK, because they were a different and older demographic. And coming back to other things that Sega did that changed the industry, and not in a technology or even a video game sense, but they broke Nintendo's monopoly on the industry. Now, Nintendo obviously never had a presence with the NES over in PAL territories, but Japan and the US, they were unstoppable. What was it, 97% of the market they owned?
Yep.
If Sega didn't come along and disrupt them, where would that have come from?
Well, I was just kind of scribbling down some things there because, after a headache, my train of thought goes, I get something that comes in here and then I'm listening to you talking, it goes out there. So, but I mean, that whole breaking of Nintendo's monopoly, they freed publishers from the shackles. They basically allowed retailers to have the balls to stand up and say, no, we want to give more shelf space to a rival platform. So they helped developers and publishers, they helped retail, and obviously you've got the rating system.
Yeah, you have the rating system as well. Another great shout there. You've just got to wonder if Sega stayed in the arcades and just did ports for other systems, because they actually did do ports for the PC Engine, or get their games got ported to the PC Engine and the NES, or the Super Famicom, or not the Super Famicom, but the Famicom in Japan. And Sega could have said, what, we'll just do software. And Nintendo would have had 97.3% of the market in the US, probably 100% when the Atari 7800 died, which eventually it did. And then who would have challenged? I think 3DO only came in because the market had already been disrupted. Atari might have come back with the Jaguar, but again, that wasn't going to break the monopoly. It barely made a dent in the Saturn generation. The people say the Saturn was a failure. Saturn sold nearly 10 million units. The Jaguar sold 300,000. So they weren't going to make the monopoly. Does anyone really think that if Sony just burned off of the back of the Nintendo deal, if they came out and said, right, we're going to make a new CD-based console, which would have been sprite-based because Sega wouldn't have innovated in the way that they did, would they have broken into the market? Sony today wouldn't have existed. The PlayStation wouldn't. But they would have gone. They would have tried to. Come on, make games for our PlayStation console. What, and leave Nintendo? Yeah, nah.
Sorry, mate.
But Sega, like almost crowbarred that industry out of them. It's why it's great talking to Tom and Al about those stories, and that's why they're held in such high regard, because they talk about the way they basically harassed Walmart into letting them come in.
And again, it goes back to that whole thing about their stories have to continue to be told.
Yeah,
as the generations go on. These guys are and not just saying that because we're fans of them and they've been kind enough to come on, but they are legends. They forged the path that the industry would follow. And you mentioned about how Al said to us about how proud he is of that whole lifestyle choice that they made. Tom saying to Sega of Japan, we're going to go after an older demographic. It's Sony who get their dues. Sony get their dues far more for that than Sega ever do.
Yeah.
People automatically go, "Oh, Sony made gaming for adults. They made it cool and whatnot." Well, I think that applies more to a certain demographic in the UK. They were smart in that they used Wipeout as the soundtrack for it to take PlayStation into clubs. People have mentioned that there was PlayStation pods in clubs, with Wipeout playing, that obviously that drew people in. So that is true that was going after an older demographic and driving a kind of more lifestyle brand for them and their platform. But again, that was Sega's ball they took and ran with, because like Tom and Al, Sega of America and Sega of Europe as well, with the kind of Pirate TV, the Cyber Razor Cut, and that whole kind of lifestyle thing, that they were still selling consoles and games to kids who were sitting in their bedrooms with these
Yeah.
consoles. But they were also appealing to college students, university students, people who were going to clubs and bars and pubs and things like that as well. Young adults, the young kind of 20-somethings, were still buying like Streets of Rage, Sonic 2, Road Rash, all these kind of games that were more mainstream, more mass marketed, more adult, kind of a Streets of Rage especially. So it was, for me, I'll always argue the case that it was Sega with the Mega Drive and Genesis that took gaming mainstream, that made it a more of a lifestyle choice. Jimmy, who's now a doctor, by the way.
Yeah.
Jimmy, the cybernetic, gamer, is no longer doing cyber razor cuts. He's a doctor in the States. He quit acting, trained to be a doctor. Good on him.
Yeah.
But all the kids in the UK, they wanted to be him. They wanted his big red Sega trailer with his skylight and his big revolving chair with all his monitors and his plethora of Mega Drive games that he'd sit there and play. That was just something that they did. So I don't, again, people automatically, let me guess, in that poll, I'm guessing Sony were top.
Sony were top. And I can't begrudge Sony for being top, because, Sega took it to the masses. Sony took that ball, ran with it, and you look at the unit sales for the PlayStation, that's unprecedented levels of, adoption. And you could say that Sony reached the masses far better than Sega did, but Sega were the ones who brought it to the masses, not just with targeting those college demographics or those older demographics. There's, in the UK especially, there's those old Viz adverts. The more you play with it, the harder it gets.
That's right.
Playing with that will make you go blind, and you see the guy playing with something. He's got his back to you, and he's obviously naked, got his hands around, and it goes to the front, and he's got a Game Gear in front of him going. They were targeting adults. I think I've mentioned before, my auntie, my mum's younger sister, had one. My uncles, my uncles and my dad's younger brother, they had them as well, had Mega Drives. And these were like, relatives that would have been in their late 20s at the time. And obviously the Sega penetrated that corner of the market. Got people that you wouldn't really expect to pick up a video game. No, so they certainly weren't going to be going into Toys R Us to pick up a NES. Going up to the electronics shop and picking up a Mega Drive was something else. So yeah, that they did things in terms of hardware, in terms of video games, in terms of the game design, that just changed the industry, and the industry wouldn't be where it is now if it wasn't for Sega.
Even the hardware design of the Mega Drive doesn't look like a console. It was very much a late 80s piece of hi-fi equipment, the slider for the volume, the headphone socket, things like that. The kind of very jagged edges, the big circular top. Everything about that was it didn't look like a toy at the time. It was very much, if you sat that beside one of those kind of 80s hi-fi units, with a turntable on the top and the double tape deck and your CD multi-changer and stuff like that, at the time, it would have looked at a place beside something like that in a home entertainment system.
Yeah,
So even the design of the hardware was more akin to being in a living room as opposed to a bedroom.
yeah, the Mega Drive 100% looks like that. It does. It's got, yeah, as you say, the volume slider, the headphone jack, the ports at the back. It was made to be a multimedia device.
Yep.
You compare the original Mega Drive to what was out around at the moment, the PC Engine and the Famicom. They look like toys next to it, and that kind of carries over to other generations, like the Saturn. Both of our opinion is probably the best looking. Obviously, we're going to be biased, and obviously we probably caveat this whole episode with the fact that we're going to be biased. Like, you listen to the Sega guys, for crying out loud. I mean, what do you expect? But it does look like something that you could see. You've got your great big Technics tower, and you've got your Sega Saturn next to it, or maybe you've got your Mega Drive and your Mega CD right next to it. That looks like I mean, even this one's unhooked up. It's the original original Master System. Now, obviously, this one wasn't designed in Japan, but it doesn't look as toyish as the Master Systems, as the original NES does. So there's just something svelte and chic about Sega platforms that the hardware looked a lot more mature and looked like something futuristic.
The Model 1 Saturn was spoke about with that kind of very, also it's plastic, but it looks like a kind of almost 3/4 transparent black kind of glass with the access and power light hidden underneath whenever they don't come on until you press the power button. They shine through the elliptic buttons and and then you've got the PlayStation 1, which, looks like a toy, and I can slag it off as much as I want because I had one and I invested heavily in that, and the PS2 and the PS3, and the PS4.
Yeah, I've still got my PS1 up there. It's boxed away. I just use the PS2, but everything about the Saturn, the lights, the access read light, the fact that you've got the little transparent bit of plastic, you can see the disc spinning.
That's right. Aye,
chef's kiss, just absolutely beautiful. But Sega, innovative, so many classics. Your Sonics, your Streets of Rage, your Shenmues, your Crazy Taxis, your Golden Axe. Outrun, Afterburner, Space Harrier, Daytona. All the way, you've got your mass market games, your Fantasy Star Onlines, which brought MMOs to console, to your niche games like your Cosmic Smash, games like Wonder Boy. There's just so much out. It's such a rich history.
Yep.
And it's just kind of gutting just to see that in a list like we saw in GQ, and that we see so often, that these games just aren't featured.
Aye, and the thing is as well, it's, if it wasn't for the community, and I don't know if Sega get a bit maybe lazy, but I don't know, maybe did they see the work that the community does and think that it's being done for them, so why bother? I mean, one example, we've already spoken privately about this, but Stellar Assault, which is a Saturn kind of reimagining of the 32X game, was it Shadow Squad it was called in the West? The team that done the amazing English translation of Bulk Slash have done the same for Stellar Assault on the Saturn. I've been playing it a ton. I was on the Shiro live stream whenever the guys basically announced that they had a couple of the guys on, the voice actors, same voice actors who did Bulk Slash have done Stellar Assault. And it's such a good game. Honestly, I had so much fun with it. I'm continuing to have fun with it. It's one of these games where very arcade driven. You have to start at the beginning and work your way through. You can't save after each mission unless you play what's called the trace mode, and you've got a memory cartridge, because the saves are that big that you can't actually. You can basically save a standard game in terms of your trace. So any mission that you clear, the game will allow you to go into trace mode and choose a mission. So if you were to play from 1 to 15 and you load it back up, your blocks it's only 2 blocks of a save. You can pick to go to any of those levels, but to actually save a full replay of the missions that you've done, you actually have to have a memory card in there. But the work is so good. The voice acting is absolutely top tier. These guys have done an amazing job. Like some of the kind of lines, I've ad-libbed a couple of lines as well. Like there's one that gets me as the kind of the commander guy. There's like basically the aliens launch an asteroid at Earth, and it's got like different kind of rockets on it to power it to send it faster. So you and your squad are getting round the side. He goes, "It's going to be hell to get ahead of this thing." So you go ahead, you shoot all of them, and then whenever they kind of rockets explode, it blows up the asteroid into loads of wee bits, and then like you clear that, you blow up all out because the bits are still too big. They're going towards Earth, so you need to all destroy them, and then you clear the field, and then it's like, oh no, incoming. I mean, it reminds me so much of the asteroid. I don't know why I keep thinking of it whenever I play it. The asteroid field in More Than Meets the Eye. You tricks report, we are being followed. Decepticons. It's like, but there's like a swarm of enemies comes in, and the wee commander guy goes, "Okay, squadron, engage, don't die." It's like just the wee quirky lines. It's so good. I patched the patch came out separate. So you have to have the ROM, to actually use the Sega Saturn patcher tool and patch it. If you want to play it and you've got an ODE, if you go to the Sega guy's account, I've pre-patched the ROM there. So it's available to download the links into my Google Drive. If you've got an ODE and you want to play it and you maybe aren't comfortable, patching it and doing anything with it, then it's sitting there for you guys to grab it. So head on over to the Sega guys account and you'll find that there. It's the pinned tweet. You'll not miss it.
Yeah.
But it's the community work is doing a hell of a lot more to keep Sega's legacy going, and not just that, but improve on it by giving us these. I mean, Bulk Slash and Stellar Assault should have come out over here. Like, fucking great games. But they're doing more than Sega seem to be doing to bring their games over. Grandia, you're enjoying Grandia translated.
Grandia translated. Beautiful, beautiful game. And I think that kind of brings us back to, the almost penultimate segment is, why is this happening? Why are Sega, we've talked about how much we love them, accepting for taste. We've talked about trends and tastes and how they change over time, how different generations seem to enjoy different types of games. We touched on, there's a certain generation now that love their story-driven games, and fair play to them. The next generation so far, it looks like they enjoy their more action-orientated, more gameplay-given games. Will that generation, when you do that, GQ do the top 100 games in 30 years' time, will there be a bunch of grumpy old people going, "Well, where's God of War? How could you not have God of War?" But so I think we've covered that. But coming back to one of the biggest reasons why some of this is getting forgotten is Sega. I think they did change substantially, and you do see that. And there is kind of a cutoff point when, obviously the Dreamcast was a massive turning point for them when they left the hardware business behind. But we've talked about the Xbox 360 episode and the Xbox episode, where what Sega was delivering on console was kind of what you'd expect. But then when they were built by Sammy, they changed, and they changed a lot. And it seems like, what they give us now just isn't quite there in terms of honouring their legacy.
It's like a wee bit of the soul's gone. As Soul Calibur said, the legend will never die, but unfortunately, part of them definitely did. I've got a kind of weird theory. I don't know the way. I know they've done this poll in Japan that came with the Mega Drive Mini 2, and they basically asked what you would like to see next as a mini console. And I know the Saturn is Sega's most successful domestic console. It's the one that finally beat Nintendo in Japan, and that's why it's revered in that territory. But to me, even the Dreamcast, I think there's a lot of romanticising about the Dreamcast. It's in within the community. I think there's an aura about it where it's made out to be more of a success than it really was. Amazing machine, love it. Imported it up their top tier console, but are Sega ashamed? Like, is it a past that they don't want to go back to? They don't want to dabble in. Just a theory I've got. They keep going back to the Mega Drive. Now, the Mega Drive was a flop in Japan, but Sega of Japan would recognise that in the West, the sales in Europe and America made it the most successful global console they've ever had. So they keep going back to that. But the Saturn and Dreamcast, maybe because they had to pull the plug in Dreamcast early due to financial problems, are they ashamed of those two platforms? Is it a history they don't want to go back to?
Yeah,
Did they maybe feel that, like, I think Sammy or the Sammy group that Sega's part of, Sega Sammy, they're a lot tighter with the purse strings than Sega ever were, you
yeah,
know. So do Sammy look at it and think that, are they smart enough to see through the nostalgia and the retro craze and all the kind of romanticising? Are they clever enough to cut through that and see that perhaps the market isn't there for the mainstream in terms of what it would cost for these devices? Obviously collectors would kind of congregate and would definitely go after them, but out with that, like, there's still a market, I think, for a Mega Drive Mini at 100 quid. People remember Sonic, remember Streets of Rage, remember Final Fight, remember Rystar, but is there going to be enough out with the collectors, to make a Saturn Mini and a Dreamcast Mini financially viable as a
hmm
return? And again, it's that whole thing: is, do they think that those two generations are totally sullied, that they just don't want to go back to it? It's a theory, a thought that I've got, that perhaps because they keep harking back to Mega Drive and Genesis, that's where they keep going.
yeah.
So again, just what goes on in this
No,
wacky head.
I think there's some merit to that. I think they do feel that the Saturn and the Dreamcast sully their reputation a lot. Obviously, they're never going to touch the 32X with a barge pole because that absolutely destroyed their reputation. But the Saturn, you still get a lot of pockets in social media and in the retro gaming community where people, well, or just in gaming in general, will just say, "Oh, you know, the Sega Saturn," and obviously the perception in the West is completely different to Japan. But they'll say the Saturn didn't have any good games. There's a reason why even talking about this GQ thing, there was not a single Saturn game in there, even
No.
though I think there should be about 20 Saturn games in there personally.
Well, Night should be in there. If
It should
Metal
have
Gear
been.
Solid is in there, then Night should be in there for the Saturn, as far
But
as
it's
I'm concerned.
it's never going to have that popularity
No,
because
no.
it's just so niche. Unfortunately, it's one of these things where I think if you stuck people in a room with the best Saturn games, a Saturn and the best games, a PlayStation the best games, and the N64 and the best games, I think it would be at least a bit more even than the perception is now.
Aye.
People that had never played those consoles, kids that had never played those consoles before. I mean, it'd be impossible to get someone that's not heard of a Nintendo or a PlayStation, but if you got them all in, I think the appeal of each one would be fairly even. But because of perception and because of the way the marketing and the way that the media was at the time and the way that those consoles performed, the Saturn's kind of got this black mark on it where people think that it's not great, and that's kind of where you and I have always had that struggle. It's it being our favorite console and getting people to understand and appreciate, and it's getting a lot more appreciation now.
It is,
But
yeah.
but for a lot of people, the Saturn was where Sega dropped the ball, whereas in Japan, Dreamcast is where Sega dropped the ball because they weren't ready to let go of the Sega Saturn.
Nope.
They didn't want Dreamcast at the time.
No.
They wanted to play their Saturns more, and that's part of the reason why the Dreamcast didn't do as well in Japan. So,
Aye.
and I feel like that bad feeling probably carries over to some of Sega Japan's thinking of, right, do we make a Dreamcast Mini when? So one thing that I'm watching at the moment, I'll mention this again in a bit, is Uncle from Another. Well, actually, I finished watching Uncle from Another World now, but I was watching it, and he's, you know, obviously they're quite reverential to Sega, and we'll come back. We'll come back to that in a bit, but he mentions the Mega Drive. You know, he goes, "And my first love was Sonic and Tails." He goes, "I'll tell you about my first love." And I go on. It was Sonic and Tails when I first saw them on the title screen in the demo kiosk. And he talks about, obviously the sound is featured heavily in there.
Aye.
But there's no mention at all of Dreamcast, none whatsoever, which I think is quite telling.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of it's bittersweet to see the love the Saturn gets now. You know, it is great to see. You know, also like Jason, Jason Madison, he's had one for I think about a year now.
Yeah,
and he fucking loves it. You know, he absolutely loves that machine. He's modded it out, and he calls it he's Aladdin's cave of games, and it's just a kind of a shame that it took a couple of decades and a retro craze to
yeah,
open people's eyes. But as I said before, it's almost like it's a kind of posthumous win.
yeah,
You know, it's nothing makes me happier, same as yourself, than to see someone picking up like a Sega Rally or a VF2 or Fighting Vipers or Fighters Megamix or Manx TT or whatever, Burning Rangers Knights, and going, "Oh my God, how good is this game? I never had a Saturn when I was a kid, but how good are these games?" You
yeah,
know, we joke, there's people that in the comments and on Twitter and here that laugh that we should get commission for the amount of Saturns that we've managed to influence people to get through content and tweaks. But aye, it's brilliant to see people coming back to the Saturn and enjoying it, and actually giving it a chance and seeing what it's got to offer and just how good the games are. I'm not going to say where are, because they still
they
hold up.
still are.
But aye, that is quite telling that the Dreamcast wasn't featured in that show.
No,
It's set in Japan, so obviously, that's why again people maybe don't understand that the Saturn remains Sega's darling in Japan. It's the console that beat Nintendo, and that's all Sega wanted to do was
yes,
beat Nintendo, and the Saturn done it in Japan.
it did.
So that in their re-siloed mind, that's what matters.
That is now. It's. I mean, part of this is the reason why this is all happening. Really, is because the people that are getting into the Saturn now are the retro community. You know, the ones that are discovering it, and the people that are discovering it now are like, "That's amazing." And you still got people that the people that buy the Mega Drive collections or the Mega Drive minis are collectors, and then again, they're people our age, maybe a bit younger, with disposable income that want to get into the retro game. And you get people that are a lot younger that want to try it out. You get people that are are older. Again, people like my aunts and uncles. That my voice is going. Excuse me. You get people that are a bit older. Yes, thank you very much. That'll pick up a Mega Drive Mini, but then it's a small niche. It's not going to be mass market, and you can, and as found off why this is happening. Or obviously, it's partly Sega's fault. It's partly people moving on, but these consoles are niche now, and
Yep.
You're not going to get someone who primarily plays PlayStation or primarily plays Xbox or primarily plays Switch go out of their way to try and play something that's out there on the Sega Saturn. They're just going to play the whatever it is that Sega give them, whether it's those Mega Drive collections or the minis, or I don't think they've done a port of a Saturn or Dreamcast game since the Xbox 360 PS3 days. So Panzer Dragoon got a remake, but not by Sega themselves. So these people that have got games on tap or Game Pass, or have got all this content on the Switch or the PlayStation, they aren't going to have the time to go out, and it's a shame, really. And that's really what Sega should be doing, is reminding everyone. Now, Atari. Remember when we was talking to James and Tom from the Junkyard, and I think James Harvey was talking about the Atari Celebration
That's
pack.
right. Yep.
Which is phenomenal, and it's phenomenal that there was a pack that came out like that celebrates Atari's legacy as much, because Atari should be in this conversation as much as Sega did, because they're as, if not arguably more important, if you go back to the 2600 days. What they've done for video games is almost beyond compare. But the difference is that Atari are basically a shell now. No, who is it? Who is Atari now? Um, is it is it
I struggle to answer that question,
is
mate,
it
honestly.
Infogrames that owns the majority of them
I
now?
think so, yeah.
But then there's bits of it that are owned by like Midway, owned not Midway, but obviously Midway bought a bit, and then they got bought by Warner Brothers. So Warner Brothers own a bit of the catalog. It's always so segmented, but somehow they came together and made this 100-game compilation of Atari games, um, which is really good and really did the company proud. Obviously, not enough that it's getting onto this, getting onto anyone's favorite list, but it's nice that there's stuff coming out recently that's getting this much recognition. And you think Sega aren't dead? The Sega we said Sega of today are very different to Sega back then. There's no reason why they can't put some sort of love and effort and time into a collection like that. Mega Drive, the latest Mega Drive collection had what? I think they had 60 games on, and that was just across the Mega Drive. Like the Atari collection's got Jaguar games on there, 2600s, 5200s, 7800 games, Lynx games, got things from everywhere, arcade games on there, all sorts of emulators. I mean, the Jaguar is even harder to emulate than the Sega Saturn, yet they've taken the time to actually emulate it for that pack. Why aren't Sega doing it?
Aye. I mean, it is good though that to preserve Sega's future, Sega at one point were going to vanish,
Yeah,
um, and obviously, Okawa forgave that debt as he
yeah,
passed away and saved the company. But you would hate to see Sega go down that route where they're broken up
yeah,
in different bits on this and that. And it comes back to like a tangent here, but the kind of clamour from the American Xbox community.
yeah,
Let's acquire Sega. Let's acquire Sega. And it's like, let's not spend the money on EBK. Let's just go after Sega. And I'm like, go after Sega and Capcom. And I'm like, first of all, you're never going to strip Sega out of Sammy,
yeah,
right? Even though Sega have been selling off their arcades, they still have theme parks. They still have umpteen different little, still got some arcades. They're still doing some form of, arcade games as well in Japan primarily. But you're never going to strip Sega out of Sammy. So that whole thing about just going by Sega, it's a total non-starter. A Japanese company being acquired by an American firm, especially Microsoft and Xbox at that point. So that's something that will just never happen. But I would hate to see that like Sega Sammy sold off maybe the home console divisions or whatever. If they try to split the way like you've said happened to Atari, that would be sad.
yeah,
You would hate to see that. So in a way, it's nice that Sega are secure within
yeah,
the kind of Sega Sammy group. They're kind of safe in there. They're thriving with what they're doing. Say, just spent $700 million on Rovio, so there's clearly wealth there to use for the right acquisitions on their end. So, aye, it's that part. I just wanted to kind of touch on that because I think that was a good point you made about the fact that Atari are now so split up. But why Sega couldn't? I've said it before on here. Cloud Arcade, mate.
yeah. No,
You know,
it's like a no-brainer, isn't it?
you have an arcade. You set it up how you like. You have packs. You buy the fighters pack, the driving pack, whatever, the Daytona pack, the Sega Rally pack. You could buy posters, merchandise, decorate your arcade. Your pals could come to yours. You could send out friend requests, visit their arcades. They could come to yours, play each other on your machines. Oh, I see you've got the Daytona pack. I'll come to your arcade and play you on that. Oh, you've
Yeah,
got Virtua Fighter. You come to mine. But it's just there's so much they could do that would tap into the way gaming is in the current era. But even just a basic slap 100 odd games in a bloody disc
yeah,
and just let us play. As you said before, please Sega, let us take our money, let us play these
yeah,
games. You know,
yeah. I think, yeah. I mean, that's what Sega needs to do. As I said, well, I don't think they've done anything Dreamcast or Saturn related since the Xbox 360 PS3 gen. But I think the silver line in it all, and I think this is probably where we'll probably end up now, is the Sega are still there. Their legacy maybe disappearing in the wind as our generation gets older, and the new generation will hook onto what's new and shiny. But Sega at any point could revisit that legacy and say, look, this is what we did. And they've made compilations, they've done series in the past, like Sega Forever. I thought that was going to be great. It turned out to be I'm talking about the mobile games.
Do you remember the tease for that?
Yeah.
Like there was a Saturn was on it, the Dreamcast was on it. It was like a big thing. I thought, oh, here we go. I mean, I was really excited for that, for where that was
So
going to go, and it's just been nothing.
I think I bought the first 3 or 4 of them. Now I can't even restore the purchase and get ads regardless. But again, and then they did the Sega Ages on the Switch, which that superb thought of virtual racing is kind of the crown jewel of that. But there's so many on there that are brilliant. And again, they just kind of just stopped. So I don't know if it's that they're not successful or what it is, but Sega really just need to honor their own legacy. And I think the silver lining is they're not broken up like Atari, where the rights to all their games are all over the place. And it's not like they're Commodore. Both you and I have had Commodore machines and have links to the Commodore in our gaming past. Commodore is just a complete non-entity. I don't even know where that sits now. But Sega still are fully in control of their original IPs and making good financial decisions, and it probably hurts Sega fans like ourselves. We probably think, why are you spending $700,000 on Rovio? Why aren't you making a new console or a new Sega Saturn Mini? Why aren't you putting more than a $30 million budget into the next Sonic game, which apparently is what Sonic Frontiers had a budget of, just about 30 million. Compared to other AAA games, that's a paltry amount for your. As was it VGC called them, the Sonic the Hedgehog publisher. This is their mascot, and they're barely putting any money in behind him. But that's Sega being
changed days.
Yeah, it comes back to when I was saying Sega were cavalier. They were out there. They just wanted to, try anything. With Sega now is extremely risk adverse, extremely guarded. But at least it means that they're safeguarding their future. There's a lot of Square Enix have had to sell Tomb Raider and all of that catalog.
That's right.
Sega haven't had to do anything of the sort, so they're quietly doing very well for themselves. So there's still always that hope that they could just do something. Say, look, this is our. Or let's have a look at what's in the cupboard. Oh, bloody hell! Look at all these IPs in here. Oh, what's around the back of the sofa? Oh, there's even more IPs.
It's like Eddie Murphy in that Delirious sketch.
Yeah,
the franchises fucking out. Franchises.
Exactly.
It's like, hey, Yu Suzuki. Hey, franchises. It's like, you just never know. But I think, mate, the important thing, as I said, is that for as long as Sega don't honour their own legacy and give us, reasons and means without going down emulation or ODEs or other drive routes to play these games, is that the content that's out there that does talk about the history, and there's a big focus just now on, game preservation and ensuring that, history isn't forgotten. But as we spoke about on WhatsApp, the biggest threat to gaming history isn't that it's lost, it's that it's being rewritten.
Yeah.
The thing that I've got a big thing where if you put content out, docu-series or, any kind of videos that talk about the history of or what happened to or why such and such failed, that you've got to get the facts right, because especially if you're a massive channel and you're reaching hundreds of thousands of people, what you're putting out there, will be taken as gospel and will be spread. For every person who watches, maybe they'll tell someone else. So that's how misinformation spreads.
Yeah.
Like the Saturn had a extra GPU flung in at the last minute.
Yeah.
It's like they opened up the CD tray and went processor, more power. Doesn't work like that. So that for me is the biggest worry. It's not that history's lost, it's that it's rewritten. The stories that were told and the people who pioneered and the decisions that they made, that they're not told accurately. I say we ain't going to be around forever, so these videos, what we're doing as a hobby just now, who knows, maybe in 40, 50 years time, somebody stumbles across this and, Sega's legacy is being lost. What happened? The year is 2100. It's like,
what is Sega?
what's a Sega? A Saturn? What's that? But we joke about it, but, we are living relics at this point, mate. Sad to say.
It is. But I think to end it on a more positive note, there is hope. There is, as I said, there's the back catalogue that Sega could draw into at any time. This stuff is available on Steam, etc. And hopefully that they pull their finger out and make some games or port some things over to modern consoles. There's enough for it. People are still going on about port of Panzer Dragoon Saga. We're getting stuff like Cosmic Smash and on PS VR 2.
Yep.
Panzer Dragoon, we had House of the Dead, Panzer Dragoon remake or Panzer Dragoon 2 remake. Stuff's still coming. You've got to believe that they're going to try and draw in that back catalogue eventually. There's talk about them resurrecting old franchises. And when we're talking about stuff being historically catalogued, we do have things like the Console Wars documentary.
Yep.
Which I think is being dramatized now as well, isn't it? I think that's what Blake said. Wow. That they're turning it into a series. But yeah, I mean that's out there. So these bits and pieces of Sega's legacy are out there. We just need, Sega need to do what they can to reserve their own legacy. And listeners, viewers, if you aren't as familiar with Sega, but you have, then God, you've got a journey for you. You've got some things to discover. Come in with an open mind, and I think you'll never cease to be entertained.
No, 100%, mate. As you said, the riches that are there, the means that are now there to enjoy these games, as we've mentioned before. ODEs, emulation, Saturn emulation is getting better. It's not quite there yet, but it is getting better.
Yeah.
Mega Drive's easily done. Dreamcast easily done. There's plenty there, plenty means. So much. If there's parts of the library that even you and I, are still delving into. Fan improvements, as we've said, like Bulk Slash, Stellar Assault, Grandia, obviously not a Sega game, but so on the Saturn, it was one of the games that everybody wanted to come west. It didn't. So there's just so much there still to experience, even if you're a veteran, never mind a newcomer.
Yeah, absolutely, mate. But mate, it's been an absolute blast as always talking through this with you, and a nice, interesting chat today. I hope our viewers and listeners enjoyed it as well.
Yeah, it's not a bit different, mate. Something that's been kind of on our minds for a while, and I like to think, I hope that we've covered it with our usual degree of humorous tact. Nostalgia blinkers and Sega bias. We try to leave as much of it at the door as we could, but it's an important topic that we felt quite passionate about. So I do hope that you guys have enjoyed it.
Yeah, so if you did enjoy it, please let us know with a comment below. Give us a like and a subscribe if you want to see more of this content. As we said at the beginning, we're hoping to populate the channel with more and more content beyond even just the weekly content that we're doing at the moment, but new podcast every 2 weeks, new video every 2 weeks. So every other week you get podcast video, and maybe even more to come from that. But James, mate, thanks so much as always. It's been an absolute pleasure. Please get in touch with us. You can catch me on Twitter at swoop_D. Catch the account at Sega Guys. But until next time, stay retro, and we will see you on the Sega side.
Sega!